I'll show you the easy way to make olives and pimentos in a canning jar with a lid. Hint, it doesn't involve rolling tiny balls of clay. One day I looked down at a green glass seed bead and thought, that kind of looks like an olive. Step 1. Harvest some green seed beads. These look pretty decent already in this glass jar, but you know what looks even better? Pimentos. Initially, I took the obvious route and filled the hole with tiny bits of rolled up balls of red clay. But then I came up with a much better way. First, knead some red clay and set aside. Then lay some seed beads in your hand. I chose 13 because I'm unlucky. Then press a flat disc of clay onto the seed beads and push them into the clay so the holes fill. Once all the beads are filled with red clay, stretch the disc and extract the beads. They come out pretty clean, but mine had tiny scraps of red clay, so I rubbed them around in my hand to get the extra clay off the outside of the bead. Well, that looks like something. Now we're making some pimento pieces. The pimentos will be red squares floating around in the jar, so I started out by rolling the clay very thinly, and now I'm making some vertical lines using my utility knife. I should have mentioned this before now, but pimentos are just red sweet peppers. Then I turn my ceramic dish and make lines going in the opposite direction, so I'll make tiny little squares. I'm using polymer clay, so it needs to be baked, but I hate turning on my oven for tiny things, so I baked all of these pieces in some aluminum foil using a heat gun. I'm using UV resin for canning my olives, and this stuff is toxic, so I like to wear rubber gloves when I work with this stuff. To fill my jar, I added some resin and then some olives, and then more resin and more olives, and I continued in this fashion until the jar was full. I used a UV flashlight to cure my resin, and I did this from multiple angles to make sure there's no uncured resin inside the jar. Now it's time to put a lid on it. You can use fabric, but I chose to use some white paper towel to top off my jar. First I wet my paper towel with some watered down white glue, and then I pressed it around the rim of the jar. I have a bit of skinny wire here from a twist tie, and I'm using this to secure the lid to the jar. I wrapped the wire around the lip of the jar, and then I twisted the ends together to keep the lid on securely. Because of the white glue mixture, this lid will dry exactly in this shape. I clipped off the extra bit of wire, and then I painted the lid with some watered down brown paint to age it. You could also glue a label onto the jar if you'd like. After I aged the lid, I thought the shiny metal looked a little off, so I used a tiny paintbrush to paint it black. I still can't decide whether it looked better before I painted the lid in the wire, so you guys will have to let me know in the comments. If you want your own popsicle stick shelf, here's the video for that, and make sure you check out my other videos as well.